Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2021, a 5-month reading mission I'm embarked on with a bunch of other booktubers. You just follow the hashtag Book Trek 2021. I leave it on the video so you can find any other videos on the subject that aren't me, in which we're reading Star Trek fiction, starting with the original series. Then we moved on to the Next Generation, and for all of October, we're reading Deep Space Nine. And my path on that reading journey has been rocky. I have encountered more really bad Deep Space Nine novels than any other iteration so far. And I don't know if that's a psychological thing, that there are just as many or more really bad original series novels, and I just don't care because I'm so emotionally invested in the original series. And I also don't know if that carries over to the Next Generation, where I wasn't a big fan of that iteration of the show. So I was going into the reading and rereading of the novels hoping to like them, and maybe I was giving them a leg up while I was doing that. I don't know if it's that, or if it's that by the time Deep Space Nine novels were being produced, there was a real production quality to it. There was a real conveyor belt going on, and maybe the authors were given very little time, very little room, very little maneuverability by their corporate overlords. Certainly, I've heard that story from people who've written Star Trek novels, that there was a heavy editorial interference in what they were doing. I don't know what the explanation for it is, whether it's practical and does exist, or whether it's perceptive, but one way or the other, I have been encountering a great number of really bad Deep Space Nine novels, or Deep Space Nine novels that were pretty good, but that weren't all that much Deep Space Nine, that could really have been anything. And our book today kind of sort of continues that trend. It is by Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush, who I believe are husband and wife, and it's The Long Night. Here we have the Ferengi barkeep, Quark, and the station's shape-shifting constable, Odo, on the cover. That is Deep Space Nine, the space station. That is the wormhole, the stable wormhole that opens behind it. And that is, well, it's a shuttlecraft, but on this cover it really should be the Defiant, which is a small, souped-up, really powerful, clenched fist of a mini battle schooner of some kind or other. It's not a starship, but it is not a shuttle. And it's a craft that Sisko falls in love with. Benjamin Sisko is the commander of Deep Space Nine. He becomes captain and takes the Defiant out on missions quite often. This is the story of an ancient race, the Jabetians, that were deeply monarchical, deeply theocratic centuries ago, when there was an uprising on their planet and their hereditary rulers had to flee. And they fled the planet with a great amount of wealth and a great amount of treasure in cryogenic suspension ships, and have been gone for centuries, and have therefore been the subject of a garnered legend about the size and the wonder of their treasure trove. If only someone could find their derelict ships, imagine how much treasure there would be. Even a treasure hunt that even extends to the people who aren't greedy for treasure, but who want just the archaeological, the historical finds involved. The novel begins with a big trader in Quark's bar. Lots and lots of traders come through the wormhole. Lots of other traders come to Deep Space Nine just in general. This trader, we're constantly told he's a Caxtonian, and we're constantly told about him that he smells really bad. I don't know why, but because we don't get many details like that. Star Trek doesn't often have the strength of its convictions when it comes to that. There are hints throughout Deep Space Nine that Klingons smell. Maybe not smell bad, but that they have a very powerful body odor. And there are hints dropped all over Star Trek Enterprise that Vulcans thinks humans are smelly. That element is hardly ever pushed. In either case, this trader has an item that he wants to sell to Quark. And Jadzia Dax, a science officer on board Deep Space Nine, who is also a joined Trill. So she is human, but she has a non-human symbiont inside her that has centuries of life experience that she can draw on. Jadzia Dax happens to be in Quark's bar when this traitor proffers this device, and she happens to recognize that it is probably Tibetan. That it almost certainly comes from, it's almost certainly not a fake. It's almost certainly a genuine item. And that therefore this guy, this traitor, may have found at least one of those abandoned ships, may have found more. And that has to be clamped down on, because the whole galaxy would want to converge on first Deep Space Nine and then that salvage area. And a lot of them would have guns blazing. The Jabetians are still around. They still are a 70 or 80 planet confederacy that the Federation would very much like to join them. They're wealthy worlds. It would be a coup for them to enter the Federation. And they very much want to know what happened to their old ruler, their old supreme leader, and all of their treasure and whatnot. It would be a political and military flashpoint, so Benjamin Sisko clamps down on it right away, throws the traitor in the brig, gets from that traitor the location of where he can go to find where the traitor got this item, and heads off the station with Jadzia Dax in the Defiant to find that relic. But word slips out, and a large number of people, including the Tibetans themselves, realize that some new clue to the location of this lost leader and his lost treasure has turned up at Deep Space Nine. So while Sisko is away, armadas of treasure hunters, opportunists, and vengeful Tibetans are converging on the space station, which, keep in mind, is barely armed and is not garrisoned. So there are no starships to defend Deep Space Nine. I'm not going to harp on this all month long, I promise, but that doesn't make any sense. And this is another book that simply wouldn't... I'm not saying it wouldn't be possible, but it would be a completely different book if there were a Starfleet admiral who had planted her flag at Deep Space Nine with a fleet of ships. It would be a completely different book. Instead, a huge amount of the tension derives from the fact that we don't know whether or not the station will survive while Sisko is away. We don't know whether or not Sisko and Dax will survive while they are hunting for clues to this mystery. And the whole time that this is happening, there's a subplot involving Benjamin Sisko's young son, Jake, and his Ferengi son, Nog, who's the nephew of Quark. Jake and Nog are unlikely best friends, but they are... we gather that they are some of the only young children on Deep Space Nine, or maybe there are plenty of young children, but most of them are Bajoran. Maybe Jake and Nog just hit it off and are friends. In any case, while they're playing, Jake discovers that one bulkhead in one certain part of the station rings hollow. He thinks there's something behind it, an open space behind it. He goes to Miles O'Brien, the chief engineer on the Starfleet engineer on Deep Space Nine, and mentions this to him. And O'Brien says to him, well, I haven't finished mapping out all the places on this station. You want to go exploring, you feel free, but if you encounter any Cardassian technology, you let me know before you touch it. Right? Okay? And while you're doing it, I'll give you permission to hunt around there, but you have to map it for me to do a little work on my behalf. That's the subplot of this book. And there's a lot in this book that's not good. There's a lot that's not good in here. I know these two authors have a great deal of writing experience, but the large part of the yardstick that we use to judge whether or not a Star Trek novel of any iteration of the show is good is whether or not it rings true to the characters. And the characters almost never ring true in this book. With a couple of exceptions, a couple of flashes here and there, but almost never. Take, for instance, that subplot that I mentioned. That's insane. The subplot is just insane. Starfleet, not to mention Miles O'Brien, I'm talking Starfleet before any of this, would of course have mapped out every single inch of a station that just 2 weeks before belonged to the Cardassians, an enemy alien species known for their deceitful minds, known for their booby traps. Of course, Starfleet, there would not be huge areas of the station that Miles O'Brien, just one guy, hasn't got around to mapping yet. What if they have bombs in them? What if they have viral contagions in them? It wouldn't happen. There wouldn't be any such space on Deep Space Nine at the time when this novel happens, which is a long time after the Federation has taken control of the station. It's not just the next day. It's a long time after. There's no way there'd be any spaces like that. And if there were, Miles O'Brien certainly wouldn't tell a young boy and his playmate to go explore them without adult supervision. No, none of that makes any sense. Starfleet is in control of this station. They have renamed it and made it a deep space station. So they would map out every inch of it. And it wouldn't take Miles O'Brien crawling around in conduits. It could be done mechanically. If it could be done mechanically with sensors now, in 2021, then it can certainly be done in the 24th century. And it isn't. There's no hint of that at all. There's no hint that it would be strange. And that would be bad enough, but the thing that Jake Sisko finds behind that hollow-sounding bulkhead is a space big enough to fit hundreds of people. It's a vast area. It's insane. It's just insane. And it distracts. I know it's supposed to be a boy's own adventure. I know it's supposed to be a kind of fun distraction from the plot, but it distracts in a different way. It irritates because none of it would make any sense. None of it would happen. Same thing is true with little details. When the whole of the key of Benjamin Sisko's crew is brought together to talk about this artifact and this lost fleet, Benjamin Sisko's first officer, Kira Nerys, is a Bajoran national who's been fighting the Cardassian occupation her whole life, picking off Cardassians from behind hedgerows, literally doing that. She's been a terrorist in the streets for the last 20 years. So she, of course, knows nothing about the myths of this lost fleet and this lost treasure. And when she's brought in, when they all gather together to talk about what they're going to do, she mentions that she has no idea what this is. And everybody, including the rest of our heroes, starts to laugh at her because she doesn't know this. And at one point, Kira Nerys actually says, "So you're laughing at me because of my ignorance?" And nobody says anything because the answer is yes. And it wouldn't be. It would never happen. It would, by this point in the show, it would never happen. I'd like to think that in any Starfleet installation, it wouldn't happen anyway. Starfleet officers, Benjamin Sisko himself, starts laughing at someone who doesn't know something. The notes like that crop up throughout here. There's a note later on, about the halfway point in the book, about Odo, Constable Odo, that just doesn't ring true at all. There are notes between Sisko and Dax. They are old friends, and that's a different kind of relationship than a new friend or a subordinate, and it wanders all over the map. Even towards the end of the book, those wrong notes are still sounding. And a complaint that I'm having with quite a few Star Trek Deep Space Nine novels is that the authors create a scenario and then don't explore it anywhere near the length that it could be explored. The scenario that I just described has tons of potential, and barely any of that potential is scrapped, is touched in this book. Barely any of it. So the Curse of Deep Space Nine, the Curse of Tarak Noor continues, because this wasn't all that good. I mean, I'm using very generous yardsticks here. I realize that this is pastiche fiction. I realize that it's aimed at fans of the show who might be expected to bring more to the narrative, more knowledge to the narrative than a normal book would. That doesn't absolve the writer or writer team of all responsibility. There's still a requirement to tell an interesting, rounded story, a story that is shipshape on its own. And that doesn't happen here, and it hasn't happened in a lot of Deep Space Nine novels that I've read. By far, for me, in October so far, by far for me, the best Star Trek thing has been this new pad, this new data pad that I'm absolutely in love with. Is obviously a Star Trek device, and it's the one that I like. It's the Star Trek thing that I like most. But I'm going to push on. I'm going to continue. I had a theory going into this book that maybe I was encountering all of these duds because I'm concentrating on earlier Deep Space Nine novels. Although I've encountered a couple of duds that weren't, including some from the relaunch of the series that went back to tell old Deep Space Nine stories 10 years after the show, the 10-year anniversary of the show. The preponderance of them have been these earlier novels, these earlier numbered novels. This is number 14. So I think for the next week or so, I think I'm going to give myself a couple of days off. First of all, let my co-host catch up with me. But I think for the next week, I'm going to read very late Deep Space Nine novels, see if they're any better along those lines. And one has been proposed to me, written by an actor. Now, one of the only positive Deep Space Nine reading experiences that I've had in October has been a book that at least had an actor's name on the cover. J.G. Hertzler, who played Martok in the series, co-wrote a book and called The Left Hand of Destiny, and it was a two-parter, and I liked it. I liked both the parts. There's another book written with an actor's name on the cover, Andrew Robinson, who plays a fan-favorite character named Garak, a Cardassian who is stranded on Deep Space Nine. He seems to be a humble tailor, but there's a lot more to him than that. And Andrew Robinson is a ham, and the fans loved it, that he just hammed things up. And became very invested in Garak's story. And there's a Garak novel that has Andrew Robinson's name on the cover, so maybe I'll try that, but I think I may leave these, like the first 20 Deep Space Nine, maybe the first 30 Deep Space Nine novels, the ones that were written on that conveyor belt, when there were 4 Star Trek novels a month, and it was a steady process, and you needed content into the mill. Maybe I'll avoid those novels. They don't appear to be doing any good. But the yardstick that I'm using for these things as to whether or not I enjoyed them in any way is very simple. When I'm done with the book, do I delete it from my collection? I'm going to delete this. There's no chance I'm going to read it again. There's no chance I'd ever want to, even if Deep Space Nine, even if Book Trek were to return to these original 5 incarnations of the show in some later year. I still wouldn't reread this thing. I'd find something else to read, even if it's fan fiction on fanfiction.net. And that's what's going to happen here. I'm going to delete this thing and move on to the next book. But I think we'll wait. We'll wait until next week to do that. I don't need to be doing these every day and telling you this book stank, and so did this one. And so I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.